So I recently had the luxury of being bedridden for a couple weeks as I recovered from a minor surgery. And I took advantage of that time to read a whole bunch of fun new George MacDonald books, which I hadn't gotten around to yet. I kind of felt like C.S. Lewis as he recovered from his shrapnel injury in World War I, except for there wasn't any awkward amorous nurse around. But I thought I'd share one of these books with you today, and that would be a collection of George MacDonald's letters. I had no idea that this existed until recently, and I'm really excited that it does. This particular edition is called An Expression of Character, and it's edited by Glenn Sadler. And when I say edited, I mean that it kind of shortens any letters that get too long and rambly and irrelevant. And it also, I think, only includes kind of the most interesting letters, otherwise it would be a much bigger volume. But he has a whole bunch of other great resources in here that I'll get to later on in the video. But before I get to that, I'm going to share with you some of the highlights that I found while reading this book, and I might as well start at the beginning, when he's 8 years old. He's writing a letter to his father, and he says, "My dear Papa, I return you many thanks for the kind letter I received on Wednesday." And I won't read the whole letter, but he ends by saying, "I am sorry that my writing is so bad, but my pen is very bad. I remain, my dear Papa, your affectionate son, George MacDonald." Isn't that precious? And by the time he's 12, he's actually already decided what he wants to do with his life. He says, "My dear father, it is now time for me to be thinking of what I should betake myself to. And though I would be very sorry to displease you in any way, yet I must tell you that the sea is my delight, and that I wish to go to it as soon as possible. And I hope that you will not use your parental authority to prevent me, as you undoubtedly can." So he already knows he wants to be a sailor. And spoiler alert, he ends up going on a ship to America around here and gets very seasick while doing that. So it's probably best that he ended up being a lecturer instead of a sailor. But as he continues to develop, we start to see some kind of doubts creep into his mind. And he shares his concerns with his father in this very open and respectful way as he's writing these letters, because he began to differ with his father on theology, I believe. In this letter, when he's 20, he says, "I think I am a Christian, although one of the weakest." And he adds later on, "But I trust that if God has led me to Christ, he will keep me there." This is when he's 20, right? And so 2 years later, he's still struggling with things, but he has hope, I think. He says, "I have many doubts yet of my own condition, but I fear too good grounds for doubting. But I hope my Heavenly Father will lead me into all truth. All the knowledge of this world does seem so incomplete, so spiritless without religion." Now, with MacDonald having all of these doubts, you might be surprised to hear that around a year later, he's applying to seminary at Highbury Theological College. And what's really cool about this edition is that they include a good bit of the application material in with the letters. So we have the questions the college was asking, and also MacDonald's answers to those questions. And some of the questions are things like, "It is really important that people in ministry be real Christians. Why do you think you are one?" And MacDonald was very honest and candid about his doubts. He said that for years he felt that Christianity had no life in his soul and that he struggled with his doubts. And he says that he decided eventually to just try to do what was right instead of trying to constantly figure out what to believe. And he said that it was then that he began to see some of the beauty of religion, some of the grandeur of the truth. He says, "I hope I am a Christian, partly because I see something of the glory of the truth, and partly because in some degree I try to do the will of my Lord and Master. I wish to be delivered from myself. I wish to be made holy. My hope is in God." But still, he had issues and doubts, and maybe was a bit unorthodox, I bet. He says, "I have many difficulties, such as at one time I could not have contended with, such as make me fear whether I be a Christian. But I cannot wait till these are gone before I follow this work. I will go forward looking to my God, and I trust he will help me." And despite how candid he was, or perhaps because he was so candid, he ended up getting accepted into seminary and becoming a reverend. Now, we've seen in his unspoken sermons in our other series how MacDonald likes to kind of hold dogmatic things more loosely than most Christians tend to. And I believe that was also the case in his in-person sermons as well, because maybe 4 years later we get an address by MacDonald to his congregation, and he's saying, "It having been represented to me that a small party in the church has for some time been exceedingly dissatisfied with my preaching, it has become my duty to bring the matter before the assembled church." And he says that his first impulse at these people's discontent is to resign, to give them what they want, which is for him to quit. But he realized that that would be unfair to the people who might be benefiting from his sermons, just to quit because a few people are dissatisfied. So he actually asks the church, do you all feel this way, or is it just these few people who feel this way? And in a letter to his father around this same time, he says that a bunch of people came forward and told him how much he has been a benefit to them. So most people were satisfied, but even still, he says to his dad that if God opened another door, he would probably take it. And we know that's what he ended up doing. He ended up quitting the church because they cut his pay to nothing, and he needed money. And so he ends up turning to writing books, which we love, and also to lecturing all over the place to get his money instead. And even later in his life, people are still writing letters to him as Reverend MacDonald, and he keeps correcting them, saying, "I am no longer a reverend, and I never particularly liked that title anyway." But that's all I really wanted to say about this kind of arc of doubt that you see illustrated in his personal letters and stuff during this course of his life. And later on, it plateaus off into a real strong hope in Christ that he has all throughout his older years, despite a lot of hardships. And that's one other thing I wanted to talk about in these letters, is there's kind of a thread of tragedy weaving all through them. From him losing his mom and his siblings when he was younger, to him losing his own kids when he was older. And he himself struggled with kind of the same illnesses that they had. And I think he had tuberculosis, because he's coughing up blood often, and he regularly has to be bedridden for weeks, and occasionally even for months, all while he's trying to earn enough money by lecturing or book writing to sustain his family. And you also see his poverty follow him because of that. And even when he's in his 60s, he's writing a letter to his cousin asking for, I think, oatmeal, because he can't afford it himself. And throughout the letters, you see a few times where he's borrowed money and frantically trying to find a way to pay it back, and the publishers are late at publishing his book, so he doesn't have the money that he thought he would. And it's just all it's all sad and stressful. But when you think about how much faith he had and how much love he had in his family, he's still over there doing plays with his family and musicals and presenting all these wonderful lectures, and it's really kind of inspiring. And you can also remember that a number of people ended up kind of becoming his patrons. I think Lady Byron was one of them, and Ruskin is another, and the Queen even gave him, I think, an annual sum as well. So he had the support and backing of all these great prominent figures, but he's still, with his health issues and his large family, struggled to make ends meet. But on a more positive note, I wanted to talk about his trip to America as well, because it was kind of hilarious. He ended up going on a lecture tour to the US and I think Canada as well, with his wife and his son Greville. For like 8 months he was gone, and it must have been hard to leave so many kids behind and just have to fill them in with letters about everything that's going on. But the letters that they have included are really fun. We have ones about their passage across the ocean in which they're all getting seasick, and we have ones from his wife saying just how kind of annoying the American accent is, at least where she was. His son Greville also was just utterly shocked about how much the Americans could eat. He said that he was pretty sure they had a hollow leg, for where else would the food go? And he wanted to dissect a Yankee in the future to find out for sure. They also described MacDonald's giving lectures, and at this one big hall, his wife said that he got a little nervous at the beginning and missed a few of his points and sped up too much, but that it went really well and everyone loved it and the people were cheering and the curtain fell, but it fell behind him. And he couldn't figure out how to get through it, and it was too heavy for him to lift up. So he was stranded on the stage after his lecture, and he's kind of going back and forth trying to figure out what to do, and eventually he just bounds off the stage into the audience as everyone laughed and cheered. So there are a lot of really fun, quirky moments that you get to see in these letters that you wouldn't get to see otherwise, and they definitely don't come out in his books ever. Another thing that I was surprised by was just how many famous people he met and had interactions with. While he was in America, he casually wrote a letter to his daughter Lily saying, "Emerson, his wife and daughter came to lunch. After lunch, we went to see Longfellow." What? Oh, it's amazing. But he has other interactions, like I said, with Ruskin and Lady Byron, but also with people like Tennyson and Mark Twain as well. There's also a really humorous and embarrassing letter he writes to Thomas Carlyle saying, "I know you gave my friend your signature, but I borrowed it and lost it. Could you send me another one so that I could give it to him?" I don't know if he ever got that signature, but he had to ask. But that's enough by way of a teaser. I think you get the idea of what kind of fun personal tidbits you can find in the letters. So I wanted to spend a couple seconds talking about the other features this edition has, because there's a lot of them. Not only is there like a family tree at the beginning of the book, which is very helpful, but also there's an introduction written for each phase of MacDonald's life, as well as important dates all listed out, a list of all of his publications, and a lot of fun pictures of the MacDonald family, many of which were taken by someone named Charles Dodson, whom we know better as Lewis Carroll of Alice in Wonderland fame, because he was a close friend of the MacDonalds. There's also like an index of names and ideas at the back of the book, and footnotes all throughout that really help explain the context of the letters and who people are. So really recommend this if you're interested in MacDonald's life on a personal level. But just beware, since they are letters, you will have to kind of go through some more mundane things to get to whatever you think is interesting. There's just a lot of content in here, and something different will stand out to everybody. But that's the nature of reading letters, and I think it's a really fun thing to do. So anyway, I'll see you next time. Come on, I'll get you food. Excuse me, there's a hawk trying to get to my chickens.